we are going to pay homage to the historical contributions that Blacks have given here in the U.S. And so this is a special event that we have the opportunity to bring to you virtually, the private collection of Nia and Morris McAdoo. Together, they've assembled over 425 artifacts, some of which are going to be shared with us today. So quite a treat. They're opening the door to the exhibit, which showcases, African American experience in the United States from the time of slavery all the way up to current day with the election of, Barack Obama not too long ago. So we have the honor of being guided by a renowned public historian, Nicole Moore. And she's a consultant with over 10 years of experience within the museum industry, with her primary focus being around the interpretation of enslavement at historical sites and museums. So her accolades are many, but among them are serving on the board of directors for the National Council on Public History and being a published author. So normally this is a traveling exhibit. So when things normalize, maybe we'll have an opportunity to host them here locally in North Carolina at Lenovo. So look forward to that day. But today we're taking you on a private tour. So just buckle your seats, enjoy the ride. And we're going to encourage you to chat, post questions in the chat. We'll possibly address some of your observations and questions as we go through the exhibit, but we'll have Q&A towards the end. So with that, Nicole, take it away.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much for being here. I am really happy. I'm in Georgia right now, but Charlotte made me. I went to UNC Charlotte for undergrad and grad. That's how I met Nia. And to know that y'all are in NC, I feel like it's a little reunion. So I'm happy to be here. I am especially happy to be here with y'all to really share this amazing collection from the Homage exhibit. Nia and Morris have been collecting art for years. They have really focused on the stories of African Americans and finding those artifacts that not just bring our stories to life, but it puts it right in front of us, right? And a lot of the times, the only way you can see artifacts like this is if you go to a museum or if you work in collections. So for them to want to share what they have, not just with us today, but with the world, is really, really special. And it's really empowering as we take a deeper dive and a more holistic dive, not just to Black history, but to American history and the roles that African Americans played in our history. So Nia and I are gonna chit chat for a little bit on this collection. And then we're gonna show you, like when I tell y'all to see it in person is a sight to behold, it is a sight to behold. Some of the things as a historian, when I first saw it and I was talking to Nia about it, I was like, these are the things that I need. Just because there's so much depth and breadth, and it's an amazing treasure trove. So I'm so glad not only that she's doing this, but that she's also exhibiting it for the public to see. So thank you, Nia. And with that, can you tell us a little bit about the origins of this particular collection? How did you come to start collecting these pieces of Black history? Like, what led you specifically to collect pieces that tell our story?
So the collection started with just one piece. When I purchased my first home, my grandmother gifted me a piece of art from her collection. And so what I chose was the Elizabeth Catlett piece, Survivor. And it's something that she displayed by her front door. And so it always had good memories for me. And that was the piece I chose. And that's what really started the collection. And so Morris and I have added to the collection every year. So we go to auctions for the most part for art, and we're able to add to the collection over time. So the artifact side started a little different. So you know how you style your coffee table?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I was on Pinterest and I'm like, well, how can I make the coffee table pop? And so I decided to purchase some vintage ebony magazines, right? So those get delivered and I put them out and I'm like, I can't just have one. I need like 4 or 5. And then I needed a smaller magazine to offset that, which was, of course, the vintage Jet magazine.
Yep.
Right. And so if you are Black in America, you grew up with Jet Magazine. And what makes Jet Magazine so cool is that it was weekly and it covered everything. You have a lot of politics covered in Jet. And so when I started to read the old Jet magazines, I'm learning about things that I vaguely knew about, and it made me research more. And so I'm learning about organizations and movements and key people, and I'm a history buff. And so I'm jumping down, the Wikipedia rabbit hole based on what I'm reading in these Black newspapers and magazines. And so one thing led to me, looking at auctions or additional artifacts, and that's how it started. But it really took a different meaning when Obama ran for office. So my grandmother was very excited. And with me living in North Carolina, which was a swing state, he was here often.
Mhm.
So I saw Barack and Michelle and Oprah because they're, we're all good friends. And we would see them like every couple of months. And my grandmother just thought that was amazing. So any newspaper that he was in, any clipping, she would priority mail me boxes of newspaper. And she sent it to, my sisters and cousins, and they were like, please, we can read it on the internet. We're okay. And she asked me one day, she said, well, do you want me to keep sending them? And I'm like, Nana, of course, send me whatever you get, send it down. And one day we were having a conversation and she said, in 50 years, you're going to sit down and you're going to talk to your grandchildren about the work you did to help get the first Black president elected. And I shrugged it off. I was like, oh yeah, if they ask, I'll tell them I canvassed and made calls, but it wasn't a huge thing in my head. But what she said was, in 50 years, whoever has that artifact, has that newspaper, gets to frame the story around it.
Yeah.
And it really changed how I looked at it and really propelled the collection. And that's when we really got intentional about acquiring pieces that told the story of how we got to the election of the first African-American president. So primarily, our collection goes from early American history to post-civil rights. So most people categorize post-civil rights as 1968. Morris and I collect until 1978, which is the year we were born. And so that's where we stop. We have select pieces post 78, but the bulk of the collection is enslavement to 1978 post-civil rights.
Amazing. And you know what, you're so right. And your grandmother is right about whoever has the artifacts are the ones that frame the history around it. That's, typically how history has been written. And so when we look at American history today, people are like, why didn't I learn this? And it's like, who's writing it? And that's why we see such a change in it now. But we don't often hear about a private collector taking their pieces and basically putting them on the road. And that's exactly what you're doing. So what made you want to take this out to a broader audience?
So it actually goes back. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York. And if you've ever been to Buffalo, housing is very segregated. So African Americans live on one side, Puerto Ricans, Spanish live on another side. It's very segregated. And so what that means is that you have services that are very centralized. So I grew up in a neighborhood where I could walk to 5 different community centers, like a block away, 4 blocks away. Everything was very local. And what that meant, my mother was determined to keep us straight and narrow. And so I'm at one community center Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm at another one on Tuesday, Thursday, another one on Saturday, and somewhere else for summer. So I was always involved with programming. And what would happen is that those community centers would receive free tickets to things. So like Alvin Ailey and theater and history museums, and they would select students to go. And so I would sign up for everything. And it made me realize that I loved art, I loved history, I loved theater, but I felt like I was an imposter in those spaces because I only had access if someone was generous enough to grant me access. So when funding dried up, they keep the lights on in the community center. They don't do that programming anymore. When a great show sold out, there were no free tickets to give, to community centers. And so I often felt out of place. But I knew I liked it. I knew I loved theater. I knew I loved history. And so with the collection, what we're trying to do is making sure that people get to experience history informally through our collection. Since it travels, we have more flexibility in where we can display it. And, students definitely should take field trips to, the theater and museums and see it in a formal setting. But it's having the balance between the two that I think is so important. And that's why we try to share it as broad as possible. Morris and I, about a year and a half ago, we had a fundraiser at our home. And when we do things at the house, we often answer questions about the art that's displayed. And I had a conversation with someone and she said, well, why is this? It's a Romare Bearden piece. And she wanted to know why it was hung so low. And I told her, I said, so my son can see it. It's a piece that he likes. And, Romare Bearden has a park in Charlotte. We had been to the park and, he's familiar sort of with what he did when he moved to Harlem and things like that. And I told her, I said, he needs to be able to see this every day and know it's accessible to him. And it made her think like, that makes sense. And so we just want the collection to be accessible to people. And we're flexible in how we can deliver that.
One of the things that I love about how you display it when you're on tour with it is that accessibility. Granted, we're not touching all of the things, but it is such a level where you don't have to, you can lean in very gently and it's right there. And it's so accessible from the bigs to the smalls. And I love that about that. You talked about making it important for your son to be able to really partake in the art in the house. Talk to me a little bit about kind of that future plans when you're talking about intergenerational learning and how to use this exhibit as a way to cross the ages.
So one of the things that we do, my background is in higher education. So my graduate degree is in higher education administration. So I worked at Buffalo State College, UNC Charlotte, doing campus-wide programming and events. And so when we decided to exhibit and travel with the show, we decided that we would start with colleges and universities. And we always encourage the schools we're partnering with to make it a community event because grandparents and parents will bring their children, and that intergenerational dialogue, like you mentioned, is so important. It's the conversations that don't happen all the time, day to day. But when you can see, touch, well, not touch, you can't touch anything in the exhibit. And I'm often, we tell everybody when they come in, please don't touch. And I am often running up on someone and say, remember, we don't touch anything. Listen, don't touch exhibit. But to be able to see it up close allows people to think about it differently.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes the interaction interesting. One thing that we're looking to do to sort of foster that is we're in the ground stages of creating a tour that will be centered around HBCU homecomings. And the reason why we chose that is because when you go to an HBCU homecoming, you see seasoned alumni, young alumni, you know, people who not quite made it to graduation, community members, and you see a lot of families. And to exhibit it in that space when we're already looking at celebrations and celebrating the history of an institution, I think that's going to be key, and that's what we're looking forward to doing in the next year or so when Outside opens up and homecomings are back.
Yeah.
And it also allows us to expand on the roles that HBCUs took in the civil rights movement. Yeah. So everyone knows, you know, A&T. Everyone knows the FAMU protests. Everyone knows FISC. But there is not an HBCU that did not have students arrested, threatened with expulsion. And so just making sure people understand that, and current HBCU students understand that history and the foundation that they're standing on.
I recently did an event where a student, it was with HBCU students, and they're like, and what did HBCUs contribute to the civil rights movement? And I had to stop them. I was like, they were the movement.
I'm like, everything.
Like there is no movement without them. So that is going to be so phenomenal. Now, I know people are like, this is great, this is wonderful, but I want to see the things. Right. You've got, like, y'all, when I tell you this collection is dope, it is amazing. You've got some remarkable pieces, like a slave transport collar, which for me as a scholar of enslavement, that's kind of like a genesis piece for what it was. What would you consider? And I know that, you know, we as parents, we talk about it a lot, but we can't have favorites, but what would you consider your favorite piece?
So favorite and most popular are two different things. My favorite pieces highlight individuals that sparked a change.
Yes.
So when I think of, and it's a lot of these names we don't know. So when I think of Oscar DePriest, who was the first Negro to Congress out of Chicago post-Reconstruction, let me be clear, post-Reconstruction, he is the person who did an amendment that allowed African Americans to have access to jobs in the New Deal. And we know what the New Deal is, but without that one person writing, one of African Americans would have been shut out. Now we were somewhat shut out, right? But not legally because of that amendment. When we look at the fact that he was the one that wrote the letter for Benjamin O. Davis Jr. to get into West Point, Benjamin O. Davis Jr. played a very significant role in the desegregation of the armed forces. He was the officer that was over the Tuskegee Airmen. And he is the one who went to bat to say, hey, you know, African-American, we can fly, we can go into combat, and we can lead. So without Oscar DePriest, we don't have Benjamin O. Davis.
Yeah.
We probably do not have Tuskegee Airmen with the rich legacy that we have now. Yeah. And so I'm always interested in the individuals that down the line inspire change. One of my favorite pieces is an advertisement from the Dixie Labor Agency. This is out of St. Louis, Missouri. And then, hold on. So colored help was their specialty. So if you were looking for a maid, a porter, a wash girl, a garage hand, and you were in the St. Louis area and you were looking for colored help, this is the agency that you went to. It was the only one in the area that specialized in colored help. Now, the flyer itself, and this is 1930s, the flyer itself is interesting, but what we were able to acquire are the response letters from the women who are looking for employment. And you could read the letters and feel the desperation. And you have to ask yourself, you know, when you are middle class, white family, and you are looking for colored help, what does that mean?
Yep.
You know, what are your wages like? What is the working environment like? But the fact that you have so many people who are looking for employment, that they're taking what they can get. And so this reminds me of my great grandmother who was a domestic, and, you know, it really, a lot of us, not all of us, come from very humble beginnings. And this advertisement, this agency is a reminder. That is my favorite piece. But what I'll do is actually go into some of our popular pieces. So what we have here, and everyone should be able to see this. This is a slave transport collar. So this is where a lock would be held in place. This would be placed around the neck of a slave who had either escaped in the past or who had threatened to run away. So this is placed on the neck of Black people who maybe their family was just sold away, right? And now they're thinking, well, they might run to try to reunite. Hold on. So what you see, these are bells. And you can see there's a little slit in there. And so what slaves would do is submerge themselves in water and try to pack this with dirt so that the bell wouldn't move. Now, when you are running with this, it's heavy. It makes noise and you can't lay down. And so you would often see these around the neck of people on plantations or on the neck of people who have been captured and are being returned. So this is always one that people take pictures of, that they really have to take a step back after they get get information on it, because it's one of those pieces that is very moving. I'm going to go into some of the pieces that were requested by staff.
Dive in. I would love.
So this, which you won't be able to read it, but this is this is a deposition from a civil trial. What you have is a slave owner who is suing an overseer because he beat a slave so severely that he could not work. And so African Americans, we were seen as property, and this is a property damage case, unfortunately. And it goes, they explain in this document that he had permission to keep slaves in check, in order, but not to physically abuse them. And so that is a piece that we often display and have a lot of questions about. this, you can see at the top, the state of Alabama.
Yes.
This case is interesting because what you had is a woman who, I'm going to assume her husband had passed away and she had slaves. She had loaned out her slaves to bring an income for herself before the war. So the war hits, Black folks, in theory, are no longer enslaved. They go to court after the Civil War because she still wants her money. And, you know, it's money owed to her. And this is from, let me get the year for you, 1867.
Yep.
So we are going to leave slavery and move forward.
Yes.
One thing that we often, and it goes back to what we just talked about, the rich history of HBCUs. So we have a 1907 letter. It is from Booker T. Washington. And you'll see it's on Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute letterhead. You'll see the, pardon me, you see the date here. And I'm going to just read a portion of this. So this is January 29th, 1907. Dear Mr. Russell, I've delayed writing you in regard to speaking at Weston for the reason that I've found myself unable so far to state a definite date for my going north. The Alabama State Legislature is in session, and whenever that is true, there are many matters that are likely to come up almost any day that concern the interests of the institution. I think the legislature will adjourn within a few days, and then I shall write you definitely about coming to Weston. Yours very truly, Booker T. Washington. And so what is known about that time is that exactly what he said. The state legislature would pass bills and bring up for discussion things that impacted students of color at Tuskegee. And so he was very careful about when he traveled and broadcasting when he would be traveling, right? Because they can pull them back into session as soon as they knew he jumped on a train. And now they're making decisions to undermine what was going on at Tuskegee. And again, this is early 1900s. This is 1907. Just so that we're clear, all of the documents are original. They're all authentic. There are no reproductions in the inventory. We're going to keep moving forward. And these, they're going to jump around in history. It's not going to be chronological order. So here are a few of the Jet magazines that originally started the.
Is that Diane Nash on one of the covers?
No. So this is December 31st, 1959.
Okay.
May 1959. This is actually who I mentioned, Benjamin O. Davis Jr., who was the commanding officer for the Tuskegee Airmen. He became the only, or the first, four-star general. His dad was actually a four-star general as well. But to get into West Point, you need a letter from a member. And so he couldn't get in through his father. He needed to be sponsored, which is where Oscar DePriest came in. We had a request about the Pullman porters, and we are actually building out more artifacts surrounding Pullman porters. I'll give you a quick sort of history before I jump into the artifact that I pulled, but the Pullman Porter Company was a train car company that hired African-American men and women to be the butler on the train.
Mhm.
And they marketed the positions to former sharecroppers. That they had a strong recruitment campaign because they wanted to have hardworking staff that were used to working in difficult conditions. So a lot of our grandfathers, um,
Mhm.
you probably have a Pullman porter or a red cap in your family. Red
Yeah.
caps worked in the stations, Pullman porters traveled the trails. And what would happen is, and my son, when we do live events, this is his station. So he gets really excited about telling these stories. But Pullman porters, and we have their manual as well, which I can't put my hands on right now. But, they were on call 22 hours a day. So they're working on very little sleep. They are paid okay, and they are able to collect tips. The work was very, very hard, but it allowed a lot of families to enter into the middle class. And so this is a picture
Oh, wow.
so this is a Pullman porter. They were often used for photo props. And so you'll see a lot of pieces where, it's a white couple with their Pullman porter and they're, taking these photos at the station. They played a significant role in Black or African American newspapers, specifically the Chicago Defender. So when you think of the Great Migration, you think of troves of African Americans moving from the South up north.
Mm-hmm.
The Pullman porters were used to get that information down south. So who was hiring, what churches to attend, what schools. They sent that information down south, but what they would do is deliver Chicago Defenders and they would sell subscriptions. And so you got a lot of people, and you'll see a lot of people moving to the Chicago area because of the important role the Pullman porters played with getting the Chicago Defenders down south.
They were a verbal green book, essentially, before
Yes,
a written green book.
very much so. The next piece I will show, this is a press photo, and I'm a huge fan of press photos. Growing up, your city had a morning paper, afternoon paper, maybe an evening paper, but your press photo is going to give you a snapshot into what was happening that day, that morning in any given city. And so a lot of times news change dramatically. If there's a protest in the morning, by the evening, you never know what happened. And you can get press photos that usually, in some cases, have a cutout of the original newspaper article. This press photo is from September 19th, 1966. And you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone knows that a large part of the civil rights movement is ensuring that local businesses are hiring people of color. And I will read you what this press photo says. And it's titled A Rise in Status. Robert L. Vassar, 27, a checker in a Birmingham, Alabama supermarket, is among the first of his race to attain so high a position in the store which serves both whites and Negroes. The one-time citadel of segregation is experiencing a steady improvement in its racial relations. There's still problems, But compared with 3 years ago, Birmingham is a new city. And so when you look back at
Yeah.
the civil rights movement, we're not looking to be vice president of XYZ. We are looking to be able to bag groceries in the local supermarket. This was a supermarket that was white owned and served white and Black customers. And so typically you would not have a Black clerk handling the
Groceries, yeah.
a white family.
And this is 66, which is 3 years after the Children's Crusade. It's after the bombing at 16th Street Baptist Church. And so you really are seeing a transformation of Birmingham in that photo.
Definitely. We have a letter from Coretta Scott King. So if you look at the top, this is
Martin Luther King Jr.
This is Martin Luther King Jr., 234 Sunset Avenue Northwest, Atlanta, Georgia.
Mhm.
This is dated October 1st, 1968, which is the year he was assassinated, 6 months after his assassination. And she is responding to a letter from a family in Connecticut. And it reads, "Thank you for your kind expression of concern and sympathy for my children and me. We do appreciate your having Mass this said for us. The support and sharing from people like yourself give me strength and courage to try to continue my husband's work. I welcome your continued participation in our common endeavor as we strive towards peace, justice, and brotherhood. Sincerely yours, Coretta Scott King," in her writing, and then underneath it says Mrs. Martin Luther King Jr. One thing that's very important to note is that during the civil rights movement, when we exhibit, we get a lot of questions about women's roles in the movement. Most people know Ella Baker. Most people know Fannie Lou Hamer. If you don't, again, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, you need, look them up. But a lot of people, even in press photos, even when you're reading the news, it's Mrs., Michael Johnson or Mrs. Morris McAdoo. We're an extension of our husbands in the civil rights movement. And you have a lot of leaders who didn't let women take a front-facing role in the struggle. And so what you see specifically with Coretta Scott King and with Merle Evers is that they were, I don't want to say catapulted, but they were moved into a different position after their husbands were assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Both women were on the cover of Life magazine when their husbands were assassinated. You know the historic picture of Scott King holding her child. You know the picture of Merle Evers comforting their oldest son. Both of those magazines are in the collection as well. And, you have to think, Medgar Evers was assassinated in '63, Jackson, Mississippi. He's killed in his driveway, shot in the back by a sniper. And then in 1968, 5 years later, you have Martin Luther King assassinated. We know the picture, we know the story. But their wives spent the rest of their life continuing that work. Medgar Evers' wife gave the invocation, maybe, or the benediction at Barack Obama's first inauguration as well. And so we're going to keep it going maybe for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So if you do have questions at this point, it's a great time to drop them in the chat. We know how we know what 1968 was, right? We know this is the sanitation strike. We know that this is the assassination of Martin Luther King. This is an original document from the NAACP, and this is their youth field director in the southern region, and this is their annual report. And it talks about everything that the youth were doing, chartering chapters, what their response is to the sanitation strike. We're talking about what they're doing on college campuses. And this is actually written by Carolyn Quinlan, who is actually out of Greensboro. She lives in North Carolina, but she is from, I want to say Savannah. And as a young child, she participated in sit-ins. She had an older brother who also did, and she followed in his footsteps. But this is just such a heartwarming piece, because the youth were so involved in the struggle and played an integral role. And this is all highlighted in the 1968 youth report by the NAACP, which is typed, impeccably typed. We always get a lot of questions about Greek life or in items surrounding Greek letter organizations. And my husband is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And for up until recently, we only collected items about our organizations because it started as a private collection. Why would I have anything else? And so I did a show in Georgia, and there were two professors who came, and I knew they had a question because they were standing to the side, and it was a conversation with the two of them that made me really expand on what we offer or what we exhibit for Black Greeks. And so I have the regional director report for the Southwest region of Delta Sigma Theta. This is 1955.
Wow.
And it's very important. I'm sorry. We have some, this is a book that Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority put out. It's book number 2 in a series of 5. This one covers women in politics. The role that Black Greek letter organizations played in the civil rights movement is one that we can't let fall into the shadows. These are stories that need to be told. And some of the items that we are looking to continue to exhibit in the collegiate market, we're adding Greek affiliation to the items. So this is Jesse Jackson, HBCU grad, member of Omega Psi Phi. You know, we're trying to tie in more stories that are attractive to students and things they can definitely understand and relate to. So
Absolutely.
Let's go to Q&A.
So there was a question earlier, which I kind of tried to weave in there when we were talking about the Pullman porters and how they would relay information. And someone asked, Kelly asked, have you had any luck with finding an original green book?
No. So I have a wish list of items. We're not actively acquiring items right now, but a green book, a Madam C.J. Walker textbook. There are a few things that we're very interested in. The green books we cannot find. They're not even up for auction. And so I know when they do come up for auction, the price is going to skyrocket. So we may never have one, but they're very hard to acquire. And, you know, I challenge all of you, if you have grandparents that were raised in the North who, you know, may have that box of, you know, items in the garage or under, you know, in the closet, to go through it and see what you have as a family. A lot of times when our grandparents pass away, things are just tossed without going through it. Um, and I know that because that's how I acquire some of these items. And it breaks my heart when I see complete family photo albums at auction. And it's, you know, this is someone's family history.
Yeah.
And I challenge you all to make sure that you're having these conversations with your family members about what role they played, if they played a role.
Yeah.
But what they have, it could be a church bulletin from the 60s that talks about, you know, the women's auxiliary baking pies, and that money is going to, you know, the movement. When I think of people like Georgia Gilmore, who did just that, and Martin Luther King Jr. helped her set up her kitchen. They lived not too far from one another, and they would sell pies and relay information, and that money went back to the movement. And that was during the Montgomery bus boycott. A lot of these stories we don't hear until the obituaries are written.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, unfortunate.
Yeah. We got some questions coming. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So Sadie asked, how does your collection compare to what I like to call the Blacksonian, to the Museum of African American History and Culture? And are you all contributing to their collection, or like have you tried to donate things to the Smithsonian, or are you just keeping all of that separate?
So it's a very interesting question. I would love to donate something. And this is just personal, like ego. Like I would love to have something of mine there that says, you know, donated from the McAdoo family. But the reality, unfortunately, is that the reason why our collection, we travel with it, is because when you go to the museum, they have tons of items in storage that aren't on display. They have multiple copies of this one newspaper. They have multiple Madam C.J. Walker tins. They have all of these items that they don't have the space to display. And so while I'm not opposed to lending items to a museum if they're going to be displayed, donating items that will sit in a box, you know, it's not something we're interested in at this point.
And it's for larger organizations, that's a good problem to have. But to your point, then that means so much of the history, while it's being preserved and conserved, it's also still hidden. And you all give the opportunity for it to be front and center. And we love it. We love to see it. So Felicia's asking if you have any artifacts in the collection that's around the time the HBCUs were established. So 1880s, 1890s.
So we do have items that are going to be in that period. We do not have, so you're thinking right after Reconstruction. Post-Reconstruction items are becoming more or easier to obtain at auction, but we don't have anything outside of mentions in newspapers. So like we do have a newspaper that talks about the bill written to establish Howard University, but there are no artifacts in the exhibit. And one thing that's interesting about the exhibit, or people often ask, like, why aren't you speaking about so-and-so? And we only speak about the items that we acquire. So there are a million stories that we don't have because we haven't been fortunate enough to obtain an artifact that relates to that topic. So to answer your question, no, we don't have artifacts, but we do have newspaper mentions about this church starting this college that now leads into the current institution.
Awesome. And not to give away all of your sources and ideas and your go-tos, but Kelly, can you show us the Madam C.J. Walker tin really quickly?
Oh, yes.
That we were talking about earlier.
I'm sorry, it's right here. Okay. So,
because, go ahead.
Okay. So Madam C.J. Walker items were very hard to acquire. So they and they still are. It's challenging to get your hands on one. But now that they did the Netflix story, which is not historically accurate, just so you know, now you see people like if they had it, if they found it, they're selling it. This is, sorry.
Yeah.
Reverse thing is killing me. Goodness. So this is a Madam C.J. Walker. Around the top, you'll see Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company.
Yeah.
And this is her pressing oil called Glossine. Hold on. Goodness.
Show us the inside. Show us the inside.
So this still has product in it. And it's clearly a petroleum-based product. But with her line, she used sulfur. And so they would have to put a lot of fragrance in it to cover the sulfur smell. And so when you open the tin, you can still smell product. So it's not, I wouldn't use it, but it's like you can smell this product. This is one of 2 Madam C.J. Walker product tins that we have in the collection. We would love to get a distributor sign, a distributor package, or their little toolkit and a textbook, but we're often looking for those items.
And so that leads me to this question, because Kelly, who I feel is getting interested in wanting to start her own personal collection, or their own personal collection, she's they are asking if there are any auction sites that you would recommend for people to collect as we kind of wrap this up.
So let's stay off eBay. So please don't, don't buy, if you buy your purse there, don't buy your documents there. So we use a few auction houses. Hanks is one. They're in, I want to say Pennsylvania. It's interesting because a lot of times I go to Confederate history auctions to get slavery. That's where we got the slave transport collar. They selling our history left and right. And it goes back to whoever has the item gets to frame the story, because I don't always go to a Black history or a civil rights auction. Sometimes I'm going to Confederate history auctions. Grateful that they're virtual versus in person now, but I can get a list. If you want to email me, I can send you a list. And a lot of these big auctions, we just got a book in the mail like last week. And my husband was very much like, please don't purchase anything this go round. But they know what you're looking for, and you develop those relationships and put those asks in, and it works out for us. I know we're wrapping up, but a huge thank you to Chantel and my man repping A&T probably in the background. It's been great really having these conversations with you. You can visit us online, thehomagexhibit.com. We're on Instagram as well. But if you have any follow-up questions, definitely let me know. I know we are following up with a piece that's going to be emailed, right?
Yes.
Book. And it's just the exhibit in 30 objects, and we do a deep dive into 30 of the objects from the collection, a few of which you've seen today. So if you have questions, let me know, but a huge thank you. This has been great.
This has been amazing.
Yeah, it is. I think it's only the tip of the iceberg, guys. You can see, right? Nia has so many things, and I sincerely appreciate her and Nicole sharing an hour with us today to do this. And like Tiwan said, I hope that we can bring you all in when things normalize again.
Yes.
Because I definitely look forward to maybe sharing this out with the wider Lenovo family. So thank you so much for doing this, and everyone, you'll get that the video that Nia is talking about. She's agreed to let us have have a version of it for Lenovo folks. So thank you, Nia and Nicole.
Thank y'all so much.
Appreciate it. All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a great afternoon, y'all.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Awesome job. Thanks, Dan.
Yes, it was great. Hey guys, I think we went back. It's just you and I. Okay, everybody else left. But that was great.
Yep, that was real good. That was real
Yeah.
good. We recorded it, right? We did record. Okay.
Yep,
good.
I recorded it. And plus we're gonna get the she's doing a separate video for us too.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we'll be able to share that out as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll touch base offline. Excellent job. All right.
Thanks, T.
Bye.